Okay, we've looked at lots of different factors. These are all thought of as life history traits, things that affect the pattern of a normal life of an individual of the species. And there are lots of different adaptations. Some things do well as our species. Some do well as K. Depends on the strategy you take. You'll have different advantages, disadvantages. These are adaptations allowing an organism to function in its environment. And so these life history traits are the ones specifically influencing the patterns of surviving and reproducing. Populations, in turn, interact in various ways. We'll note a little bit of how they come together in landscapes, and then we'll take on things like communities in a bit. Natural environment is variable. Just look outside this time of year, and it's not all the same shade of green. We got different plants, a little more of one kind here, a little more of another kind there. We've got hills, we've got valleys. One spot's a little sunnier, one's a little shadier, and different things living in these places. So, in the natural environment, we have a landscape with all sorts of variation in it, and different organisms will like different settings better or do better in different settings, and so we get variety due to this complex patchiness of the landscape. Different populations may be isolated in one particular patch where one species does better or another. Here's an example, a spring view while the trees are still kind of leafing out up in the Great Smokies, not too far from here. And you can see different shades of green. I see some dark green that looks like some sort of conifer, a gymnosperm, and some medium and lighter greens, a few light colored patches that may be some flowers. We've got different plants and no surprise. We've got some steeper slopes, we've got some more level areas, we've got up at the peak, down in the valley. There's a lot of difference. As you move longer distances, you're probably getting some difference in the types of rock. Slope versus valley. Also, what's the angle to the sun? Some of these places are going to get a lot more sunshine. Some of them are going to be in the shade for much more of the time. And so there are lots of different factors, even though this is all an area you can see in one view, that are going to lead to different tree types. And of course, tree, that's going to be a big impact on what types of smaller plants and animals live in there as well. And of course, the smaller things are also responding to the same environmental factors that influence the trees. Here's a diagram version showing different patches of different types of trees concentrated in particular areas here in the southern Appalachians. And you see there's quite a range of different types, different things like more up the top of the mountain or down lower. Some like the low areas around streams, some like the drier slopes. We've got different patches, different things living in different places. Okay, now, what happens when we see global warming? We're seeing the effects of increased temperature already and are likely to see quite a lot more into the future, especially if people don't change how they use fossil fuels. So, going up a mountain, it's typically colder towards the top, warmer towards the bottom. So, with warming, we'll tend to see these different types of dominant trees move up the mountain. What's going to happen to the Fraser firs here? Trees aren't good at flying. if the conditions that the tree likes to grow in are now found here, the tree can't grow there. It needs soil. So things that are specialized for the tops of mountains, whether it's the trees here, or there are a variety of other things living with them, types of snails and spiders and salamanders and things like that. If things get too warm, they've got no place to go. So definitely a challenge in conservation. How do we provide places where things can move to adjust to changing conditions? A few more things. Metapopulation. This is a larger unit, including two or more populations that have some degree of interaction. Since we're recognizing the local populations, there must be some degree of separation as well. Again, different types of things can get around more or less, and so we'll tend to have more or fewer small units. For example, the snails living in the little patch of woods kind of behind the football stadium, between that and the lake. None of them might ever cross the road and get out to meet a snail from the other side of Stadium Drive, for example. On the other hand, birds living one side or the other fly back and forth pretty easily. They're not going to be isolated as much by that, although they might not like the road so much as being in the woods. So you're going to have variation. Local populations, those may be small enough that in the long term, if the death rate and rate of things moving out is high enough compared to birth rate and things moving in, that population may decline, may even totally die out. If one population is declining, it may be immigrants from a healthier nearby population that are what keep it going. And so in order to have long-term survival, having connection between good quality habitat is very important. Just one single population of a species, well, that's there, but if anything happens to it, you're in trouble. For example, there was a type of rare snail being kept in captivity, all the known ones kept together, and a disease came through and wiped them out. No other population around to replace it. So, good connection, good quality habitats. Another important example of this is a patch of woods. Okay, that's something that birds that like to nest in the woods may build a nest in. But if you're too close to the edge of the woods, there are a lot of things that spend more time out in the open, but will go a little ways into the woods to raid nests or catch baby birds, things like that. Various predators, also nest parasites like cowbirds. Cowbirds lay their eggs in other birds' nests, and the baby cowbirds will push out eggs or young of the species that owns the nest, and the bird feeds the cowbird instead of its own young. Cowbirds, as the name suggests, like to hang out with cows, and of course before cows were around here, buffalo, other animals wandering around grassy areas. So the cowbird will fly a little ways into the woods to lay its eggs in a nest, but not all that far. Similarly, there are a lot of other predators, say things like raccoons, whatnot, that tend to like being along the edge. So if you've got a big forest, okay, there's some edge, anything that nests out there, got some problems, but there's a lot of middle where it can be in. If, on the other hand, your forest is just small patches, maybe the whole patch of forest is accessible to these predators from outside. And so any attempts at nesting fail, no young live, and so the nesting in that patch of wood is only from birds that grew up someplace better and then thought, well, let's try here, and no, it isn't a good place.